She pointed to an empty table near the front door. "If more people gather around, it'll make it impossible to circulate. I'll bring you over your order as soon as it's done." Her smile had been, once again, guileless, and the businessman had barely gotten over his shock of seeing actual, genuine human warmth in this hellish place to nod and limp to the table, happy to rest his bad knee, which was acting out because of the weather. "Thanks for waiting. You are a lifesaver." The lilting, accented voice of his new barista snapped him out of his stupor minutes later. She handed him his order and apologized for not knowing how he liked it. "I asked Gaston, the manager, if he knew you liked white or brown sugar or sweetener or anything with your coffee, but he didn't seem to know, so I brought a bit of everything. Next time I promise I'll serve it just as you like it." She had given him one last brilliant smile before hurrying back to her place on the other side of the counter, though he noticed she paid attention to him as he took 2 packets of brown sugar and emptied them inside his cup before placing the lid back on. He had stayed for a little while more that day, waiting for the rain to turn more into a gentle drizzle. It wasn't until the afternoon that the idea she had told him to wait on a table, likely because of his bad leg, crossed his mind. When he had returned the day after, a little earlier than usual, he had politely bidden him a good morning before asking her for his usual. She had recited the order aloud, pausing to wait for his nod before taking the bill he offered her and giving him his change. "If you'd rather take a seat while I fill your order, I'll be happy to bring it to you as soon as possible." Her smile had been as bright as the day before, but it didn't help ease the sting of his wounded pride. "Are you suggesting, dearie, that I am incapable of waiting 5 minutes standing?" he had inquired, voice soft yet eyes steely and accusatory. She had tilted her head, furrowing her brow in an adorable way. "Are you implying that I am incapable of walking 2 steps to your table?" She had replied, calm determination in her tone. "I'm merely giving you a suggestion. You can take it or leave it." There had been nothing but gentle reproach in her voice, and, once again at odds as to what to do with a polite barista at Starbucks, Mr. Gold had limped to a corner table near windows of the shop. 5 minutes later, the girl appeared with his cup of coffee and muffin. "Have a nice day, sir," she murmured with a smile. "Nice day to you too, dearie." A soft hand crept up to his chin before he realized she hadn't departed his side, lifting his face. The girl pointed towards her shiny name tag. "Belle." "My name is Belle." Another smile and she had been gone. A smile, and he had become addicted. He had first acquired the habit of coming around the shop 15 minutes earlier than usual so as to sit and drink his coffee instead of quickly getting in and out. Belle always smiled when she saw him, bypassing all other employees to be at the registry to take his order. Her uniform was always pristine and strategically worn in a way that flattered her body and still looked professional and demure, and her hair was almost always half up and half down. She wore little jewelry and even less makeup, a hint of gloss, a bit of mascara, and a dash of soft pink eyeliner, making her look fresh and natural. She had a deep voice and an easy laugh and always seemed to be either in a good mood or trying to maintain a positive attitude. The first time he had tried paying for his order with a 20 and telling her to keep the change, she had frowned for the first time, outright refusing the tip. He had had to cajole her into taking the money from his hand. It's not polite to tell someone what he can and cannot do with his money. He had turned back to look at the line of customers behind him, a smirk on his face. "Besides, dearie, we seem to be holding up the line." She had accepted defeat with a bit of a glower, snatching the bill from his hand and practically shoving the invoice in his general direction. He had brutally suppressed the urge to tell her how much she looked like a fierce little kitten. 2 weeks after that, he had begun to swing by during his lunch break, replacing the morning muffin with a panini and taking a copy of the Daily New York Times or the latest issue of The Economist to read while he ate. He had noticed almost immediately that Belle would sometimes peek over his shoulder after placing his order on the table, her lips pursed and her eyes trained on an article in the paper. She'd linger, so focused on the words that she would sometimes place her hand over his shoulder to better perch herself. He lived for those days. A month after that, he had succumbed to the need to see her one more time before going home, so he had begun to pop by after work, usually around 7 p.m. when the after-office rush had already begun to die down. He'd order just a coffee, but she'd sometimes bring him a couple of cookies or a brownie, taking notice of that he'd eat and what he didn't seem to like. When he had asked her why she insisted on adding something to eat, she had chided him. You are far too skinny, and all that black coffee will not go down well on an empty stomach." She had paused before giving him a coy smile. "And I can't have my best tipper getting an ulcer and dying, now can I?" He'd laughed out loud at that, and one of the other baristas had dropped a pitcher full of milk. Belle had hunched down to try and cover her own laughter by hiding behind his spread newspaper. He had noticed that day that Belle smelt like vanilla and had wondered since then if she also tasted like it. He hoped she did. He loved vanilla. Those evening visits had, over time, stretched to last up to an hour. His lunch break had also lengthened, much to Mary Margaret's, the coffee-inept secretary he kept around out of some obscure sense of pity, surprise, and relief. He liked those moments the best because, unlike in the mornings, he had time to try and draw her into conversation, and also because Belle had taken the habit, taking one of her 15-minute breaks little after she'd served him his order. At first, he had just stuck with reading over his shoulder and the innate intimacy of the gesture, the way they seemed to focus on the same articles and read at the same speed, had been enough. She'd then move on to stretch a bit and walk around, and he'd take pleasure in seeing her lithe form. She had an artlessly provocative walk, her hips swinging to match the rhythm of a tune she'd usually hum under her breath without noticing that the businessman enjoyed, probably more than he should have. She had progressed from merely over-the-shoulder reading to talking to him while he leant against the wall his back was to and sipped a tall chocolate with whipped cream. She had started one day when he had been so engrossed in thoroughly dissecting a horrible piece about the supposed evil practices of multinational corporations in the light of the current global economic crisis. While he hadn't felt that many companies could boast a clean conscience, he had thought that the writer was omitting from the picture entirely the role of the public sector, both in America and Europe, and the blundering way in which most governments had first blindly denied the idea of a crisis and then tried to salvage the situation. "I know it's utter garbage, but I think if you glare at the paper anymore, it might spontaneously combust." Belle's voice had pulled him out of his inner reverie with astonishing ease. "And he's just pandering to the people, writing what they want to read." "A despicable practice," Gold had replied with false nonchalance. The barista had laughed lowly, and it had gone straight to his groin. "Well, he has to compensate somehow for his poor grammar and sloppy understanding of macroeconomics, doesn't he?" she had replied, and after they had shared a rather secretive smile, she had gone back to work. But one exchange had been enough to set precedent, and had allowed him to casually start conversations between them. Those conversations had allowed him to discover that Belle was an articulate, well-read woman with an amazingly complex vocabulary and a deep understanding of the economy. And so his pretty, addictive barista had ceased just being beautiful and kind and sexy as fucking hell without knowing it, and had started being his bloody intellectual match. Had she gotten more perfect, he was sure he would have had some sort of coronary. Thank you.